So there's a very serious conversation that we need to have. And we need to be talking about this more and more. We need everyone to be aware of this. And that is that our governments around the world don't represent the people anymore. They're supposed to exist to serve and protect the people, but they don't. They exist now to serve and protect themselves and government insiders, and to perpetuate a system of corruption and evil. So here in America, I've talked about this in other videos. If you're paying taxes, that tax money is being funneled to many different regimes around the world that are massacring Christians. Your tax money is being used to murder innocent people around the world and to fund all manner of wickedness and illegal wars. And it's a mess. But they tell us that we're free. And they tell us that we voted for this. And they tell us that it's all about democracy, which is a code word. But they tell us that that's what it's all about, and democracy is like this pacifier that they shove in our mouths, to keep us from crying, like what you do with a little baby. And it has largely seemed to work, unfortunately, because by and large, most of the people of the world are pretty stupid and ignorant. But people are slowly waking up to the reality that they tell us we're free, and they use elections to make us think that we're free, but we're really not all that free, and we really don't have representation. And these evildoers in government are just doing whatever they want, without any kind of checks or balances whatsoever. I want to talk to you today about the state of elections in the most powerful nation in the world, the United States of America. And this is relevant to everyone, not just Americans. But it should be eye-opening if you've never heard these things before. So understand something, that because of our two-party system, the candidates that we're even allowed to vote for in the first place are very tightly controlled, generally speaking. And it would seem, at least this is the story that we were allowed to believe. Whether this is true or not, I don't really know. It would seem that Donald Trump was a political outsider, and that's what made him so hugely popular initially, because we actually thought that he was not going to be another crooked politician just following the globalist one world order plan. Well, what a disappointment that has turned out to be. And I get people poking fun at me from the political left all the time, saying, oh yeah, can't believe you were so stupid to believe Donald Trump. Well, here's the thing. If Donald Trump had just followed through on some of his promises, that would have made him, and still arguably, he may well be the most notable and the best president that we've had in my lifetime. He has done a lot of good things, regardless of some of his failings and shortcomings, but the reality is we voted for him on the basis of his promises, which he hasn't fully lived up to. But if you are someone in this country who voted for a prostitute, Kamala Harris, to become to fill that spot of most powerful person on earth, at least in the visible human governments, you are a complete buffoon, and please don't even bother to talk to me. You are so foolish that we can't even have a realistic conversation. But the reality is that our elections are very fixed anyway, so it's kind of a moot point, because we have to ask this question: do elections even matter? Maybe they do, maybe they don't. My whole life I've tried to be a good citizen, and I've tried to vote, because that's what a good citizen does. And when that all falls through and the government becomes completely totalitarian, the only recourse that's left is taking up the rifle. And before we get to that point, I want to be able to say that I did everything in my power to prevent that outcome. And I personally during the 2020 election cycle, for example, wrote letters to every single member of Congress, both houses, that I could find contact information for. And by the way, many of them make themselves completely unavailable to the public by intention, I believe. And then there are many of them that make themselves unavailable unless you happen to live just within their particular district, which I think is a convenient way of cutting down on the mail and the feedback that they get from the public. Many of them are not really representing the people in their own district even, but at least by saying, well, I only take correspondence from people in my district, it cuts down on the correspondence overall that they're getting from the public when they make these terrible decisions. But we need to talk about the elections, the voting process in the United States of America. And it's bad. It's really bad. We have places in the U.S. where they are trying to give illegal immigrants the vote. And actually there are places where illegal immigrants are voting. And sometimes these leaders in their speeches slip up and admit to that fact. And it is a fact. We have places in the United States that are employing illegal immigrants as police officers. We have places in the United States where illegal immigrants have managed to infest the legal system as lawyers, and in one case a judge. That is insane. You do understand that America right now is, well, I'm of the mind, honestly, that America already fell, and it's a done deal. And at this point, it's just, we haven't been fully flushed down the toilet yet, but we're circling the drain. But, if you're of the mind that America still exists in any way, shape, or form, you've got to understand that we're in a very bad place right now. And the move to allow non-citizens to vote is key to what's coming, and you'll understand that more clearly as we go through some of these things today that I'd like to talk about. So the story that spurred this and made me feel like I really needed to make a video about this is this: radical Democrat Virginia governor signs away the Commonwealth's electoral votes to the national popular vote scam. Democrats one step closer to rigging the presidency forever. Now, this is an effort that has been going on for a while. Actually, it's been going on since, really since I think Trump was elected the first time. And here's what's going on here. So understand that in a pure democracy, the 51% always dominate the 49%. So what I mean by that is if you can get together a power block, a voting block rather, that represents 51% of the voting population, in a pure democracy where everything is by the popular vote, that 51% can then tyrannize the 41%. And that can be a pretty terrible system. And understand that we've never had a pure democracy in this country. The United States of America was set up to be a constitutional republic. And it was set up to be that way for this express purpose. So that these minority groups, like maybe you're part of a demographic that only represents 11% of the vote. Well, in a democracy, you're just going to get run roughshod over all the time, and you're not going to have any say. But the system we have of the Electoral College breaks everything up, and it gives these minority groups a voice in the system. And this is something that the political left, especially in this country, has been trying to do away with for a long time because they just want to run roughshod over everybody. And the reality is, this is really interesting. The political left does not actually have the popular vote at any level in this country. However, they cheat to such a degree, and I'm going to demonstrate that in a moment and show you the mechanisms of how they've been able to do this. They cheat to such a degree that they can make it seem like they have the popular vote. And so if they can have all these states of the Union where they've essentially circumvented the normal electoral process, then they can get control of the total popular vote by allowing, for example, illegals to vote. That would be just one way of getting millions and millions of voters to vote for you, because the illegals are here for free stuff anyway. And so of course they're going to vote for the party that's willing to give them more free stuff, the Democrats. And so if you let those people vote, of course they're going to vote Democrat. And then that gives the Democrats the power. And then, the Democrats who are pushing for democracy, which is really a code word for socialism, then you'll get to see what their true agenda is, because socialism always ends up as a totalitarian system, as communism. All these stupid deluded high school and college students who are saying maybe we should try communism. They don't know what communism is. They've never seen it. Look at these countries where religion is stamped out, and you can be executed for preaching or executed for owning a Bible or any holy book, really. These are evil systems, the exact opposite of liberty. No American in their right mind should want to live under something like that. And you got to understand, all these stupid people who think communism's a great idea, they're thinking that somehow they're going to be part of the oligarchy, the few who are the shot callers and the decision makers who get to decide how the goods are divided in society. But that's not the case. They're useful idiots. They're never going to be part of that oligarchy. And the oligarchy controls how the results of labor are distributed to society in communism, but the oligarchy also controls the power, the military power. And they have to, because they are not, because the people aren't going to be happy with how they are going to choose to divide up the resources. And so they need the military power. And whenever a certain demographic of society starts to become a little too questioning of what the authority is doing under a communist system, then there are these purges and pogroms where these demographics just get disappeared by the government. The Gulag Archipelago. Alexander Solzhenitsyn wrote in detail about how this works with waves of repressions, and how, we'll get rid of the engineers this week, and then we'll get rid of this ethnic group this week, and we'll get rid of the Polish officers this week. Waves of repressions, and you just have tens of thousands and millions of people just disappearing from society, either being shot in the head in the woods somewhere, or getting sent off to the Gulag Archipelago, where conditions are so bleak that they have to resort to cannibalism to survive. That's communism, and you are not going to like it. But what's going on here is that she's basically signed away the voice of the people in Virginia. So understand that this lady was, she's very anti-gun, for one thing, and they're most certainly, I think they already have put some assault weapons bans into effect in Virginia. But anyway, she's the whole left-leaning communist package deal. Nasty piece of work. And there were some really questionable things that happened in the election, the governor election. One of the first things that she did when she took power, her name is Abigail Spanberger, I believe. Yeah. One of the first things that she did when she took power was she rescinded an executive order that the previous governor had put into place that said that state law enforcement has to work together with ICE. And she immediately got rid of that, of course, because they want illegals to flood in so that they can give them the vote, so that they can capture our political process forever. And then America's done. She's also against guns. I believe she's already signed some stuff to that effect. And you're almost certainly going to see assault weapons bans and potentially even confiscation in Virginia. And it's going to be real interesting to see how the people of Virginia handle that. It's going to be real interesting to see how that goes down. Another thing that her administration did pretty early on was they started the wheels towards doubling their own salaries. That doesn't reek of corruption at all. And now here we are, and she is signing away the voice of the voters in her state, where, what this means basically is in a presidential election, instead of the state choosing a candidate and then the state's electoral college votes being cast for that presidential candidate, what she's just in effect signed means that Virginia's electoral college votes go to whoever wins the national level popular vote. And understand that this is part of an ongoing process. For example, during 2020, when there was all manner of election fraud, many states were suing each other because one state was saying, it's very clear that this other state, California, for example, didn't handle their voting process correctly. And the results of California are affecting the results of the entire nation, the direction that the entire nation is going to go. So these other states are being dragged along. So the states that did handle their elections correctly and with integrity are being dragged along by the states whose elections were manipulated. Does that seem right to you? It isn't. And then when these states sued the states where their elections had obvious issues, the Supreme Court decided that states have no standing to sue other states for how other states are handling their elections. That is a big problem. And this is kind of what they're trying to do. They're trying to collectivize the vote, in a sense, to a national level, because then they have enough states that are completely corrupt, where there is rampant illegal immigration, where they are allowing illegal immigrants to vote, and they can use that to influence the popular vote, and thus to subvert the entire process of American voting, rendering the voice of the American citizen mute, in effect. That's what they're trying to do. And by the way, they have made tremendous progress towards this goal. I'm going to read this till we hit a point that I need to comment. All right. The radical left's war on the American people just took a terrifying leap forward in the Commonwealth of Virginia. On Tuesday, far-left Governor Abigail Spanberger officially signed legislation that would enter Virginia into the controversial National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. This dangerous move effectively strikes a match to the U.S. Constitution. Virginia became the 19th jurisdiction. Now, they don't say state there, they say jurisdiction, which probably means you have a fair number of states and then maybe some other jurisdictions. So a jurisdiction being, it says DD there. This is an AI generated image. It says, so there's going to be some errors, but this says DD here. It should be DC, District of Columbia. That's not a state. So that would be a jurisdiction. We have like Puerto Rico and things like that where people can vote from these areas, but they're not states. They're jurisdictions. They're territories. They're principalities. Anyway, bringing the total to 222 electoral votes, just 48 shy of the 270 needed to activate the plan. So to win the presidency, you need 270 electoral college votes. And each state, by population, has a certain number of electoral college votes. I don't know if this AI image, we just demonstrated that it's not correct in all of the things it depicts. Like I said, that should be DC, and I don't know if the numbers are correct. I haven't checked all this. What this is a proportional map, seemingly of these states that are on board with this compact. And the idea is this, that these states have basically signed away the voice of their citizens, and they're just going to give their electoral college votes to whoever wins the popular vote on a national level. And that's it. And, yeah. And so right now, what they're looking for is they're trying to get enough jurisdictions on board to hit that 270 mark, because what they've done is they've basically unified all of, well, let's be honest, they've unified all of these jurisdictions to vote Democrat. That's what they've done for presidential elections. And so once they hit 270, they will have a block of electoral college votes that will automatically go to whoever wins the national popular vote for president. And at that point, all the political left needs to do to compromise elections and win every election forever is fix the popular vote. Fix the popular vote. And by the way, that's extremely easy to do. Look at this. California, New York, these are some very populous states that they have here. Something to think about. So this is a very, very big problem. Now, speaking of Spanberger, I've talked about this in other videos. There's something called the drop and roll. And actually, if you don't know what that is, you can come here to the Gateway Pundit. So this is the Gateway Pundit is a right-wing political blog, and it definitely has its issues. But one thing that it did really well was it covered all the nuances of the 2020 stolen election in the United States really well. And so there's something called the drop and roll, which is a mathematically impossible pattern that kept popping up during the 2020 elections, which was that late in the evening, the votes for Trump were over that of Biden. And then overnight you'd have dumps of votes, of ballots, that would just happen to slightly push Biden a little bit above Trump. And this happened in more than 6 states across the United States. And the Gateway Pundit called this the drop and roll, and they did many different analyses on that. And there were many mechanisms, by the way, not just the drop and roll, but there were many mechanisms that allowed the political left to steal that election. If you even believe that elections are valid in the first place, which there are so many mechanisms now to be able to manipulate elections in this country that's a pretty big if. But anyway, this lady's election followed that same pattern at the drop and roll, where her adversary was actually leading for a while, and then a massive and mysterious dump of ballots just suddenly catapulted her into the lead. Mighty interesting. Mighty interesting. I will read something else that was down in the comments. I hesitate. The comments are such a cesspool sometimes on any website. But there was this image, which was pretty interesting. I don't know that I'm even going to read it. I'm just going to let it speak for itself. No, actually, there was a comment that went along with this that was, yeah, this same comment. If this comment and this image are true, this is extremely interesting. This woman is endorsed by AIPAC and the Jewish Democrat Council of Virginia, yada yada. Champion for the issues of importance to certain voting groups. I mean, and I can say, her last name, definitely yes. Her first name, yes, that's an Old Testament Hebrew name, absolutely. She has the features, she fights, antiseptics, she attends various events, she celebrates certain holidays. This is all very, very interesting stuff. If true. And I don't know if it is or not, but, who knows? We are just seeing this, that the politicians in this country don't represent us, but they most certainly represent the interests of other countries. This is becoming more and more obvious. Anyway, I want to talk about some of the issues in American elections so you can see just how problematic this sort of widespread, and by the way, I will say this: I work in AI. All right, I work basically in quality assurance, and all day long I'm evaluating the output of AI models and rating them, writing feedback that gets taken and fed back into the models for training data. Um, Many of the big name models, name any of the top six, and I'm not going to name them for a variety of reasons, but just think of the AI models that you know of, the chatbots, and understand that the people producing these things have a certain bias, and there is built into the guidelines of these models guidance that they will never question the outcome of an election, because it's important that the people have a confidence in the political process of their nation. That is very interesting to me. So an AI will not help you unless it is faulty in some way, or you manipulate it in some way to do this. But an AI is not ever going to help you check into things like election fraud. They're not. They're just going to refer you to official outlets, and they will always give you the official story, and that's just the way it is. They're not going to help you investigate anything like that. They're not going to be useful to people in contesting fraud and manipulation of elections. So I thought that was pretty interesting when I saw that in the guidance. And I am bound by numerous non-disclosure agreements. There are things that if I talk about them, I probably would lose my job if I'm caught doing it. At some point, I probably will end up making a video about all these things anyway, because there are so many dangerous things being built into AI. It's astounding. But anyway, I did a search using Google on adjudication in the 2020 election, because this was one of the means this was one of the means that the results of that election were tampered with. And I'm going to tell you what adjudication is, because this is interesting. When you search for it in Google, it doesn't actually tell you. Like, look at these results that are coming up. Adjudication. I specifically searched for adjudication. Where is the adjudication in this? Instead, you're just being given all these so-called authoritative sources that are, okay, there's adjudication there, a small ABC 15 local news station here, talking about state level adjudication. But look at it. It's all like they're trying to cut off the inquiry. You see, countering lies about the 2020 presidential election, tracking election disputes, and all these so-called official authoritative sources are going to tell you that the 2020 election was investigated thoroughly and everything, it was the most secure election ever, which is a load of hogwash. We know that it's a load of hogwash. If you start looking into the details, you will easily find that that is a load of hogwash. But that's what they tell us, that it was the most secure election ever and all this other nonsense. And they don't tell you, they don't give me what I specifically asked them for. Give me information about adjudication in the 2020 election. I'm going to tell you what adjudication is, and you can look into it in more detail for yourself. So adjudication means that something went wrong with casting a ballot through a voting machine. And when that happens, the ballot goes to adjudication, which means that a poll worker actually looks at the ballot, and then they are supposed to cast that ballot in accordance with the intended will of the voter. And usually they can tell just by looking at it, okay, yes, this person intended to vote for so-and-so, but something happened, and I'll just vote it in accordance with their will, and so on. Now, this should be a very rare occurrence if the voting machines have been calibrated correctly. And so there is actually a federal level guideline for the number of ballots, the max number of ballots that should be going to adjudication. And it's an infinitesimally tiny percentage. It's something like 0.0006% or 8% or something like that. But it's a tiny, tiny fraction. It's not even 1% should be going to adjudication. And the reason for that's pretty obvious. If you're able to compromise your election poll workers and then get large percentages of the ballots sent to adjudication, those poll workers are supposed to be voting those ballots in accordance with the will of the voter, but they could really vote them however they want and sway the results of the election in that voting district or municipality or whatever in that jurisdiction. And there were many places in the U.S. where the adjudication percentages, the number of ballots going to adjudication, was ridiculously high. The highest I saw was 85% in one spot. But there are some places where it was 35%, 65%. Outrageous. Way above the 0.000 whatever percent that's the federal guideline. And in the areas where these issues occurred, the adjudication logs, because there's supposed to be logs that show what was being adjudicated and what was going on there, the adjudication logs are missing. So we have multiple data points that show that the election was being manipulated in these places. And of course, Google doesn't want to give the straight story on this. They're just going to give you the official story, which is that the 2020 elections were the most secure ever, and there was no voter fraud or anything like that whatsoever. Not the case. We need to talk about ERIC. I've talked about this in other videos before. What is ERIC? Well, it's an organization that these states, that's a lot of states, folks. These states contract this organization called ERIC, the Electronic Registration Information Center. ERIC gets contracted by these states to manage and clean their voter rolls. So, for example, to take voters off the voter rolls who are ineligible. That's what ERIC is supposed to be doing. However, ERIC is a Democrat-controlled organization, and they don't clean the voter rolls. This has been demonstrated. So in all these states, that's a lot of states, folks. That's a lot of states. So there's 6 per column. So we got 4 full columns. So that's 24, 25, 26 states. That's a lot of states. Well, I should check because District of Columbia. No, so that's 25 states and one district. So ERIC is not cleaning the voter rolls. And because it's a Democrat-controlled, so they have this here, and this is supposed to make you feel confident with what they're doing. ERIC is a member-driven, member-led. The board of directors is comprised of election officials. That actually doesn't give me any confidence whatsoever. It actually makes me wonder why there's this incestuous relationship here between election officials and ERIC. But of course, we know that incest is the name of the game in politics and in this country anymore. But see, having access to the voter rolls and also not cleaning the voter rolls lets the left, the political left in this country, know exactly how many fraudulent votes they can manufacture and get away with. That's what it's all about. And so when it comes to stacking that national level popular vote, they have all the data they need to be able to do that. That's incredibly dangerous. And in the aftermath of, so there were literally piles and piles, millions and millions of illegitimate ballots cast during the 2020 election cycle. About 2 million of them were counterfeit ballots that were printed in China. We know this. And you can look this up for yourself. Like I've done an extreme level deep dive into all this stuff in the aftermath of the stolen 2020 election. And my goal is not really to reproduce all that, the results of that research in extreme detail. I'm hitting the highlights here, and this is still going to end up being a pretty long video, even with the bare bones breadcrumbs that I'm throwing out there. But you can do a deep dive into any of these things, whether it's adjudication, whether it's ERIC, whether it's Dominion voting systems, or the other things we're going to talk about going forward here. You can do a deep dive into any of this stuff, and it's an iceberg. But there were millions and millions of fraudulent ballots cast in the 2020 elections. To give you a little example of this, Governor Abbott announces over 1 million ineligible voters removed from the voter rolls. In Texas alone. That's just the state of Texas. I think I saw somewhere at one point that 4 million ineligible voters were removed from voter rolls in just a few different states. And one of them was Wisconsin. Wisconsin also had an incredible number of ineligible voters still on the voter rolls. Oh, interesting. That's really interesting. Wisconsin's on a member of ERIC. How about that? Folks, the corruption and the fraud are so widespread in this country. Do you really think that your vote matters? Unless these things are fixed, your vote doesn't matter. You have no control over the direction of this nation. None whatsoever. Dominion voting systems. So, in 2025, Scott Leindecker purchased the company under a new company called Liberty Vote. Dominion voting systems. This was a notorious. They made voting machines. Of course, Wikipedia is going to hold to the consensus view, the official story. There was no evidence supporting these claims, which have been debunked by various groups, including election technology experts. Well, I guess it's up to me to give you the true story here. So Dominion Voting Systems, they always claim to be an American company, but they actually admit it here. They were headquartered in Canada. Their programmers came from Serbia. Hundreds and hundreds of programmers coming from Serbia, and then they had servers in many different places, including Spain and elsewhere. Oh, and the modems in these devices were made in China. Now, on the one hand, we were told that during the elections that these machines were not online and therefore could not have been manipulated over the internet, except the problem is there's a tech demo where Eric Coomer, who at the time, I don't think he's associated with the company anymore, but Eric Coomer, he was, I believe, the vice president of Dominion Voting Systems at the time. He's giving a demo, trying to sell the product to, well, I don't know, state or state election officials or companies, because they do also use these voting machines for like shareholder meetings and stuff like that. But in that demo video, he's actually showing all the different ways that their machines can be connected to the internet. And we actually know now that the modems that were connecting these machines to the internet, they're all made in China. That's real interesting. So this American company, not particularly secure. Another lie that came out in the aftermath of the stolen 2020 election was that Dominion Voting Systems, we were told that they did not acquire any technology from Smartmatic, which is another company that makes voting machines. And Smartmatic has a history of, where's the article? Yeah, here we go. Voting machine company, this is speaking of Smartmatic, charged in Philippine bribery and money laundering scheme. This is like one of the dirtiest companies in the world. It's known to be, to have been used to fix elections in various countries around the world, including Venezuela. It has ties to the CIA. This is just the scummiest of companies, and yet, you know, they still have a a website and everything, Smartmatic, as if they're a legitimate company and all that, and for some reason they keep dodging any kind of scrutiny. Um, it's insane. It's insane. But because there's this shadow hanging over Smartmatic, Dominion Voting Systems said no, we didn't get any technology or anything from Smartmatic. In the aftermath of the stolen 2020 election, they said that. And that was actually a lie as well. Smartmatic divested technology into a third-party company, which Dominion Voting Systems then acquired, which I guess allowed Dominion Voting Systems to technically make the claim that no, they didn't have any association with Smartmatic, but that's not true. They bought a company that Smartmatic created, and that was used to transfer technology from Smartmatic to Dominion Voting Systems. Understand that these companies, these voting machine companies, they're being used to dupe us. There are features built into these machines that are insane, like fractional voting. Or the machines can be, like the data that they record can be one thing, and then when it's displayed, it displays something else. That is insane. And the fractional voting is also insane. Like you can have a percentage of a vote. Why is that? Well, they'll tell you that it's because in these shareholder meetings and stuff, there can be fractional, like with shares and stuff like that, fractional shares and thus fractional votes and things like that. My question is, why don't they have a line of machines that is specifically for governmental elections and a line of machines that is specifically for shareholder elections, and keep them separate? Because you should never, ever, ever have fractional voting in a governmental election. Never. And yet it has been demonstrated time and again that behind the scenes, these machines are using these fractional voting schemes. And sometimes when you really dig into what's going on in the numbers and stuff like that, these voting machines can do any number of math operations to the results. They can multiply the results by a multiplier. So, maybe your Republican candidate, the votes that they get gets multiplied by 0.8, and your Democrat candidate, the votes that they get gets multiplied by 1.2, and that gives a little bit of a boost to the Democrat and a little bit of a, handicap to the Republican. And they can sway elections doing this kind of stuff. And it's been done before, actually. It's been demonstrated. Is insane. There is no reason why in 2026 we can't just hand count all the ballots and double check it. No reason it can't be done. But the reason that it won't be done is because these companies allow elections to be stolen and manipulated. And then this is actually, this is relatively recent. This is charges levied against Smartmatic. You can do your own digging into Smartmatic's dirty, dirty history. Another voting machine company that is very corrupt and that did indeed transfer technology to Dominion. Dominion did all kinds of sneaky things. They're just blatantly lying all the time about being an American company. All their Serbian programmers were on LinkedIn. And then when people started realizing, oh wait, all of your programmers are based in Serbia, like 300 LinkedIn profiles disappeared overnight. They were all told, take your stuff down off of LinkedIn. They just all disappeared. It was wild. Dominion is ready. This is by the Wayback Machine, because Dominion Voting isn't around anymore. Like I just mentioned, they've been renamed to Liberty Vote. Sounds great, doesn't it? Dominion is ready to make a difference in your next election. Yeah, we know you are. We know you scumbags are. Most definitely. And here's Liberty Vote. And let me guess. Well, actually, they outright say it, I'm pretty sure, in here somewhere, that they're getting ready for the next big, successful Key milestones from the past 60 days: a successful November 2025 election through stable, reliable system performance. We delivered strong operations. Of course they're going to say this. They want to bolster confidence in their voting machines. They're never going to tell you that there were foibles or issues or hiccups or that they manipulated an election. Of course they're never going to. They proudly serve 26 states. And you can bet that Liberty Vote is going to have a big influence on the 2028 elections. And isn't it interesting how you go to libertyvote.com and this is what they've got? A Freemasonic phallic symbol that is the Washington Monument. It's an obelisk that harkens back to Egyptian mystery religion, Freemasonry. We've talked about what Freemasons are. It's an organization for Gentiles whose purpose is the rebuilding of the Royal Arch, which is a rebuilt temple in Jerusalem. And then when you really get into it, it's a Luciferian mystery religion. They believe that Lucifer is a righteous being and an intermediary between humanity and higher angels. That's what Freemasonry teaches. And here we go. We've got what amounts to Hail Satan right on their website. The problem with Freemasons is they don't have any loyalty to God or the law of the land. And this was why there was such an outcry. So there's a book called Letters on Freemasonry, which is about this. There's a former Freemason. This is during the time of John Q. Adams. And he was a former Freemason. He had left the Brotherhood, and he was looking to write a book, an expose on Freemasonry and on their secret signs and rituals and things like that. And by the way, the stuff that he was actually looking to leak back then was so minor compared to some of the things we know about Freemasonry today, like the Order of Jesters. The Order of Jesters is so vile, I can't even pull it up and discuss it on my channel. If you look up Order of Jesters pins in Google, it will come up with depictions of bestiality, of this little demon imp who is like the mascot of the Order of Jesters, because you understand that the Freemasonic Order of Jesters is about sexual debauchery. And so, prostitutes in the Masonic lodges and things like that. And if you look up Order of Jesters pins, you will see some depictions of bestiality, of the mascot of the Order of Jesters having sex with a sheep, is the one that I saw the other day. And it'll just pop up. It's not even going to be under a filter or anything like that. I was like, wow. I mean, I knew the Order of Jesters insignia was debauched because I'd seen some of it before in other places, but I didn't really expect that, it would be showing stuff like that with Safe Search on, yeah, these are not. Anyway, around the time of John Q. Adams, what happened was the Freemasons, they ritually murdered this guy who was basically a whistleblower who was looking to write this book, and they dumped his body in a body of water, and then other Freemasons who were public officials covered up the murder. And when this became known, there was a public outcry in America, to the extent that John Quincy Adams actually ran on the anti-Mason party platform, because people realized, and that book actually talks about this, Freemasons have no loyalty to the laws of God or the laws of the land. They are not decent. They might be involved in various charity and things like that to make themselves look like good guys, but they most definitely are not. The organization is wicked and satanic to the core. And so John Q. Adams ran on an anti-Mason party, which existed, the anti-Mason party, because people were afraid that Freemasons would seize the reins of power in the United States. And that's exactly what happened. We don't need to speculate on that. We know because we have Masonic imagery and architecture and symbols built into our currency. It's everywhere. It's in our entertainment. It's in movies. It's in music. The One-Eyed Secret Religion. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I have a video on my channel, 5 hours. It's called The One-Eyed Secret Religion. And it is about, it's another expose video by a former Australian Freemason. And it is there for your reference. Educate yourself. Luciferians run our world. And we're most definitely not going to be able to wrest any measure of control back from them if our voting process is compromised, which it most definitely is at this point. And I don't really know what to tell you. I've personally given up on the federal government and America as a nation. I've mentioned this before. I moved here to East Tennessee some years ago because this state is doing things that protect liberty for the most part, but they're making some dumb mistakes too, unfortunately. The reality is we will all be under a tyranny sooner rather than later. But it's important to be aware of where we stand. Don't think that being able to vote means you're free. If anything, it's a ritual designed to pacify you and lull you into a sense of complacency. Hope you found this to be interesting. Have a good one.